I appreciate the opportunity to update you on some activities in our state. And I want to say that I'm very proud of our state. Our state pork producers and practitioners always lead, and they are continuing to do so. So some of the things we'll talk about today are first-time efforts that have shown true leadership in the ultimate goal of getting this virus out of our Minnesota, U.S., and North American pig populations. So I'm very, very excited about the progress that's been made. And what I'd like to do is just show you a few slides, give you some opinions, some feedback from the industry. I'll talk a lot from the veterinary point of view, but I'm really interested in what you have to say. And so I hope we can have a nice discussion afterwards. So this certainly won't be a lecture. This is going to be more of a little bit of information up front, followed by hopefully some Q&A and discussion amongst ourselves, because we can learn a lot more that way if we share each other's experiences. Okay, so when I met with the Minnesota Pork Producers Association Board of Directors and the Minnesota Pork Board of Directors in December, the discussion was, is it the right time to move forward with elimination of PRRS virus from Minnesota? And I believe today that it is the right time to move forward, and I believe there's others in our state that feel the same way. So let's use that as a framework for our discussion. It's the right time to move forward. First of all, I want to thank and acknowledge the funding sources that have provided dollars and in-kind resources for our research on PRRS. I'm speaking for a number of group members in our Swine University faculty. You see the National Pork Board and Minnesota Pork Board listed prominently here on this list. Your groups that you contribute to always give us very, very excellent support in regards to our research advances. We've made a lot of advances in the last few years, and so your dollars that come from your checkoff need to be commended and recognized. I also want to recognize a very important group that also supports our research efforts in Minnesota. We call this our Swine Disease Eradication Center. These are our SDEC partners. These groups listed on this slide provide us with funds as well as in-kind resources that we use to support grad students, conduct pilot projects, provide infrastructure and funding for our research farm. So we couldn't do this work we do without the support of all the people listed here. And finally, personally, I want to disclose to you that while I do conduct a lot of research in the area of air filtration, I do not receive royalties or commissions on the sales of filters or filtration equipment. I hold no patents on any filter inventions. I don't have research contracts or consulting agreements, retainers whatsoever with these companies. And the money that come from these companies get used for our, basically the infrastructure at our farm level, not for conducting filter-related research. All the air filtration research we've done have been funded by the National Pork Board and the Minnesota Pork Board. So this is, I think, very important for you to know, because I think it's important that we have options when we talk about what type of air filter we're going to use, and I don't want you to think that I'm biased towards one or the other. Okay, elimination of PRRS from Minnesota. It's the right time to move forward. The theme I want to bring forth this for the next few minutes. Why is it the right time to move forward? Well, we all know about the economics. We just heard Dr. Meyer. There's been great advances in knowledge and technology. I'll go over a few of those. We know so much more than we used to. We have a lot more tools than we used to over the last 3 years in particular. And from the veterinary side, speaking from the American Association of Swine Veterinarians and a group that we call the Minnesota PRRS Eradication Task Force, we believe that it's the right time to move forward. Let me address those two groups at this time. From the veterinary perspective, when I was the president of the AASV in 2006, our executive committee and board of directors wrote a position statement that said, eradication of this disease from the North American pig population is the long-term goal. We don't know how we're going to get there. We don't know how long it's going to take. But this is where we have to be eventually down the road, our long-term goal. So at that time, it was kind of as if we drew a line in the sand. And we told at least from the veterinary community, we can't afford to live with this disease. We've got to figure out ways to get it out. Now, after that, we organized what we call the Minnesota PRRS Eradication Task Force, or the MNPETF. And the mission of this group, and I've presented this before at some other meetings that we've had here in Minnesota, but some of you may not be aware that this group has actually been working together since 2005. And its mission is to develop and oversee the plan for PRRS virus elimination in Minnesota. And I wanted this group already up and running. I wanted to be proactive and be ready to act when the time is right. So we don't have to go and reinvent something. We already have a working group that's dealing with how to get this done. Here are some of the participants in the Minnesota PRRS Eradication Task Force. I went to Dave Preisler with this idea, and he and I sat down and we put together some people, and they were that we thought would be very helpful for our group, and they were very gracious with their time and agreed to join us. You see, we have producer representative from various parts of our state. We have representatives from the MPPA and the MPB, as well as the research committee. We've also got a number of practitioners that are involved in swine practice here in our state. You see Pipestone, Swine Vet Center, Fairmont, Cannon Valley Vets listed on that slide. The swine group at Minnesota is very active with this group, as well as the veterinary diagnostic lab. You see Peter Davies' name, mine, Bob Morrison, Mike Murtaugh, Kurt Rosso, and our newly added Alan D. Lehman chair in swine health, Dr. Montserrat Tremare. And so this is her addition to our group, as well as this task force has strengthened it significantly. We've also been having some discussions with the Board of Animal Health on how to proceed with a state plan. So Dr. Beth Thompson has recently joined our group and has provided very good input. And also Lisa Beckton from National sits on the committee as well. Now, we sat down a number of years ago and put a roadmap together. A bit of a way to see where we're going to go in the future with this plan of eliminating this virus from farms. I'd like to show you this graphic. Basically, obviously, we didn't really know how long it was going to take. So we set up some short-term goals, some medium-term goals, and some long-term goals. Now you can see short-term goals 1 to 5 years, medium-term 3 to 5, long-term 12 to 20. We didn't know how long this is going to take. We still don't know. This is going to take some time, and we have to be strategic. We can't make bad decisions. We have to think very carefully of how we're going to do this. But to begin with, what do we need to know to push the momentum forward to convince you that this is something we want to do and we know how to do? Well, we thought there would be a very strong component of research, particularly early on in the discussions regarding what do we need to know yet? What questions are still unanswered? So we said, well, you know, this is a few years ago now. We don't really know how to map our areas yet. We need technology. We don't really know the biosecurity solutions to PRRS yet. Okay? Remember, this was a few years ago. Maybe there are some new diagnostic tests that could be developed. Now, those are going to take, I think we can get a lot of that done pretty quick. But there are going to be some things that are going to take a little longer. Obviously, we want to demonstrate to you that we can do this successfully in our state. We can coordinate and work together with producers and eliminate this virus from areas and keep them free. We want to prove that we can do that. We have to demonstrate that. So that's going to take a little time. And then there's also some other things here that are very important. Looking at, are there new vaccines that can help us? Do we understand the persistence of the virus in the pig well enough? Is there genetic resistance? Those are very difficult questions, and they're going to take a little longer. But anyway, they're all important, and we have them here on the list, and they're goals for us to shoot for. We want to start monitoring farms. Lots of you are already getting your herds tested, and we want to continue to do that. We need to know the PRRS status of farms individually, but also collectively. Then we wanted to start to apply some of this new knowledge as it came forward, particularly in the area of research projects looking at regional control. And I'll talk about probably the gold standard of that, the Stevens County project, in a moment. But if this worked, and we could potentially expand this, maybe down the road a ways, we could develop areas of freedom from the disease and slowly make our way down the state and try to clean up our state. Communications are going to be very important. We're going to talk about this right away. We're going to organize a group. We're going to write some materials. The Minnesota Pork Board staff has been instrumental in organizing materials. There's a lot of literature about this group. We've presented it periodically before. We want to let you know that we're around. We want to start to build teams and communicate results. And hopefully, if we start small and work carefully and strategically over time, we will succeed. So that's the Minnesota PRRS Eradication Task Force. And right now, we're probably right about in this part of our accomplishing some of our short-term goals, and I'll show you where that is sitting right now. All right. So the veterinarians and a number of producers working together, we all feel it's the right time to move forward. Obviously, this is a very costly disease. We lose competitive advantage globally if we're positive, so getting it out would be good for the economics. It's a very difficult situation for humans and animals. There's a lot of emotional trauma. I know you care a lot about your pigs. You don't like to see them go through this disease. They suffer a great deal. And there are some market-driven opportunities right now. There are more empty facilities, and we do need to reduce our inventory somewhat. And so there are some things maybe we can do to start to clean up this disease from our state. Now, it's the right time to move forward because we also know and understand a lot more than we did 2 years or 3 years ago. We know how to eliminate PRRS virus from farms. There's Dr. Tremere right here, Montserrat Tremere. There she is, our layman chair. Hello, Monsi. She's the one who coordinated all the large-scale PRRS eradication efforts and really developed the technology to eliminate this virus from farms. She's done this all around the U.S. as well as in the country of Chile. And so we have the information and the knowledge and the technology and the experience right here in Minnesota now at our university, ready to help you. We also know a lot more how this virus moves around. The challenge was, we could clean up the farm, but a new strain comes in. We didn't know how it got in. We've worked real hard on that in the last few years, and a lot of that's been funded again by Pork Board funds. We all know now, we understand the routes of PRRS virus spread between farms. There's no question about any mystery anymore of how this virus moves around. And we know now that the virus can spread at least up to 6 miles in the air. So the question of whether airborne transmission is a risk factor or not is no longer a question. It's been answered. And we know how to reduce the risk of reinfection in swine-dense regions through the application of the technology of air filtration. And I want to show you one slide on air filtration. This is my primary focus of research over the last probably 5 years or so. And I want to just show you some of the data very quickly to show you that I believe we have what it takes in understanding how to get this technology into farms and to keep them free. Now, if we look at the data that's been generated probably over the last 3 years, first of all, at our Swine Disease Eradication Center research farm, which some of you may be familiar with, for the last 3 years we've been running a study, an ongoing study, we're actually almost in the 4th year by now, looking at whether air filtration could protect farms from becoming infected using a model of the swine production region. A model that represents southern Minnesota, where we've got close proximity of farms. Some are positive, some are negative. How does that virus move from the positive farms to the negative farms in that model? Can we stop it with the filtration? Well, clearly we can. Over the last 3 years, we've been running this day by day by day, a continuous pig flow project. We've had no infection of any of our filtered facilities, no matter what filter type we use. And in our non-filtered facilities right next door, right within this model, roughly 40% of the time, this farm will break by airborne spread. And so we're replicating, I think, very nicely what you might see down in the swine-dense region of our state. Without air filtration system, you will get infected, and based on this model here, almost 40-some% of the time. Now, what about the field? Obviously, this is very interesting up here, but if we can't apply it to the field, it doesn't matter, does it? Well, a number of practitioners from St. Peter, Fairmont, Pipestone, for example, have put this technology already in place in the boar studs for the last 3+ years. And these boar studs are in some very swine-dense regions, and the results have been very positive. There have not been infections in these filtered studs. So for the first time in many, many years, we've been able to keep filtered studs free of becoming infected. Now, the next step was the sow herd. What can we do in sow herds, again, in swine-dense regions? Well, we're running a trial right now that's funded partially by Minnesota Pork Board, but also by USDA PRRS Cap 2. And we're basically 16 months into the trial. It's a 4-year study. And we've got filtered farms and non-filtered farms. And I'll just show you quickly what we've seen so far over the last 16 months. We've got a set of 10 filtered farms. 2 of these farms have become infected. We've confirmed that this fall. However, we found evidence of personnel and transport breaches and no evidence of filter failure at this time. So we think we're very confident in how the virus got into these farms, and we do not believe it's because of air filtration failure. When you compare that to a control group, in this case we've got 21 non-filtered farms that are basically matched, the same size, swine-dense region. 17 of the 21 of the non-filtered farms have become infected over that 16-month period of time. Some of them becoming infected multiple times during that 16 months, all by different viruses. So when you start comparing filtered and non-filtered in this setting, it's some fairly striking data so far. Obviously preliminary data because we're only 16 months. But let's continue to follow along and see what we learn. Promising so far. What are some other breakthroughs? Why am I optimistic that we have the tools we need? Well, you might have heard about Jeff Zimmerman's work at Iowa State, where he's hanging ropes in the barns. Maybe some of you have ropes in your barns for measuring oral fluids for antibodies or virus to PRRS. This is a very, very nice technique. It looks like it's working quite well. We may get to the point where we can monitor our populations without having to bleed pigs. Wouldn't that be sweet? Mapping. Peter Davies from our group has put together some very nice GIS-based mapping tools. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and they're essential for us to really understand our region. I'll show you a few pictures about the Stevens project in a moment that Peter's generated along with Dr. Bob Morrison. And Bob, as I think a pioneer, along with the producers and veterinarians in the Stevens County area, has shown us that PRRS virus can be eliminated at the farm and regional level. And we know from Monsi's work that it can be done at the national level. So we're starting to really get some experience in showing that we can do this. So let's go to take a little trip up to Stevens County and just show you a little bit of the success that this group has had. Now this is a very unique county. It's quite isolated. There aren't a lot of herds around Stevens County, and the vast majority of the animals that enter Stevens County are breeding stock. Okay, so they're at a high health level, they're tested, they're coming from farms that test, and this is a breeding stock area. A lot of breeding stock are produced in this area. So this is a nice way to start, because it's an ideal situation to see if producers can work together with practitioners and create a negative area. All right, so there's Stevens right there. In case you haven't been there for a while, it's my old practice area, so I get a chance to work with this project. This is a map of Stevens County in 2004, and this is some of the early mapping technologies. Basically, each dot there is a farm, and green is good, meaning that's a negative site. Blue is unknown, it means no one's tested there, and red is positive. So that's kind of how the county looked back in 2004. And Bob and his team, working with the local producers and practitioners there, got together and started to organize this plan to clean up farms one by one throughout the county. This is what Stevens looks like at the end of December in 2009. Quite a bit different. A lot more green. Actually, there's only one red dot left in Stevens County. These other blue dots here are basically farms where Bob's just waiting to get the permission to show their status to an audience like this. But I can tell you that these farms are negative, and there's simply just one farm left in Stevens County that's positive. And plans are working forward with that farm. Now Bob, being aggressive, is looking at expanding Stevens County. So here's Stevens again, but he's saying, well, let's see if we can move out a little bit and see if we can start to develop even a larger region of negative status. So you can see where we're kind of expanding this now. This little red dot down here is my research farm, so that's why I'm happy to disclose to you that that is a positive farm. So that's in Swift County, so stay away from that one. It's got Red flags everywhere, I hope, so stay away from that one. That one actually is going to get cleaned up in June, so that will be green in the near future. So a lot of progress. And we're even thinking about taking the state and kind of just putting it at the Highway 212 border up, kind of like we used to do with the pseudораbies, as a way to kind of distinguish a northern zone and a southern zone. Not a border for interfering with pig movement by any means, just a border, a marker to try to look at a northern part of our state and a southern part of our state. And so a lot of work right now is going on with local practitioners as far as identifying where the pig farms are in the northern zone, getting them bled to understand their status, and starting to have conversations about cleaning them up. So, this might not be that tough to do. Obviously, it's going to be a little more challenging when we move south. But let's see what we can do with this northern zone and southern zone idea, and see if we can create a Stevens-like model in the northern zone. Okay, so I still believe, and I'm hoping I'm starting to convince you all, that it is indeed the right time to move forward. We need to do something. It's been a tough few years. We're tired of this disease. Too much has been lost. There's just too much lost. There's no pseudorabies-like vaccine coming forward. There's some very, very good vaccines that are being developed and tested now as we speak. They may provide, probably will, provide some support for this project. We can't dismiss vaccines. We need good vaccines. And as I talk to people around the state, we need something to do. We got to look for some positive. Down the road, things are going to get better, but what can we do to think about it today? What can we do to keep a more positive attitude? We need a plan. We need something to do. All right, well, this has to be national, obviously, but other states are starting regional projects. There's actually been some strong agreement already at the National Pork Board Swine Health Committee. There's been some ASV representation talking to the National Pork Board Swine Health Committee, and they think this is the right thing to do too. Veterinary support is building across the United States, and money is becoming available through the CAP2, USDA CAP2, for regional projects. And so right now there's one going on in Illinois, there's one going on in Michigan that's funded by CAP2, obviously the Minnesota project, and there's more on the way. So more people are watching what's happening in Minnesota. Why Minnesota? Why are we always leading? We're always the first to do a lot of this stuff. Well, we're in an ideal position to lead. In all my years, 20-some years of being a veterinarian working only with pigs, I've still never seen a producer mindset like I do in our state. Progressive, aggressive, science-based, risk-taking leaders is what we have in our state. We have got great veterinarians. All the clinics that are in this state, think about the talent we have for veterinary practitioners and pigs in this state alone. We have the wonderful group. We love to work with the industry at our swine group. We're very, very in tune and try to remain, connected with you all. We don't just sit up in our lab and count amino acids. We like to get down there and see how things are going in the real world. We have the best VDL in the world. Clearly, there's not a better diagnostic lab anywhere, especially in regards to PRRS virus diagnostics, than Jim Collins and Kurt Rosso and the group there at St. Paul. Yeah, there will be challenges. There's questions we don't have answers to yet. Animal movement issues. What's the role of the government? Can we get producer buy-in? Yeah, I know those things are still out there, and you're probably wondering about them yourselves. We'll solve those problems. We'll solve those problems when we come to them. We will solve those problems because we are problem solvers. We'll work together to get that done. So I believe we can work together to develop a producer-driven, voluntary plan for eliminating PRRS virus from Minnesota. I believe we can provide an example for the nation to follow, and I believe we can turn a negative situation into a positive. To be the first to do that. Turn this thing around from what's been a very negative situation the last few years to a very positive outcome. An example of a positive outcome that I'd like to leave you with, that you maybe have heard all about this already, were two resolutions that were recently passed at the Minnesota Pork Board and Minnesota Pork Producers Association's annual meeting in December. And let me just show you the wording that make up these resolutions, and let it ring forth as a true example of leadership that no other state has taken yet at this time. But this is what Minnesota pork producers are thinking. The resolution states that the MPPA recommends that policy be adopted by the NPPC with the end goal of eradicating PRRS virus from the U.S. swine herd. The policy should include and identify appropriate government resources and investments for accomplishing this goal, but this policy should not make eradicating PRRS virus a government mandate. Okay, that's from the MPPA. Here's from the MPB, a resolution that came forward at the same meeting and was also passed, unanimously I should say, that the MPB recommends that the focus of addressing PRRS in Minnesota and the U.S. be eradication of the virus. The MPB urges the National Pork Producers Board to prioritize research and education towards tools and techniques that can eradicate PRRS. True leadership. True leadership. And I commend every one of you for having support in these resolutions. No one has done this before. We are again on the front line, but I'm confident we can move forward and succeed. So what are the next steps? Well, this is a voluntary program. You know, nothing's really going to change at this point. We're going to continue the research. We're going to communicate the findings and our experiences. We're going to expand the area control and eradication projects, as I talked about. We're going to try to expand in the northern zone. We're going to see what we can do in the southern zone. The southern zone will probably involve more techniques like air filtration, maybe some more, again, obviously some collaboration. Can't do it without working together. We're going to build teams, collaborate with other states, see if these resolutions can be passed in other states, and so we're no longer just Minnesota doing this. It's perhaps Minnesota in an area of our country working together as a team. And we will develop a strategic plan that will be carefully thought out, scientifically driven, and again, at this point, voluntary. And we will keep this communicated to you. And I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you and talk to you about this very, very exciting initiative. And I thank all of you for the support. And again, I can't thank Dave Preisler and the group at the office enough for all the support they've given our swine group as well as our Minnesota PRRS Eradication Task Force, as well as leading the resolutions. So a lot of great people in this state. That's why I'm so confident that it's the right time to move forward, and this is the right place to get it started.